Luca Ceribelli looking very suave in his photo there, and he'll be playing Bartosz Ekiert. So yesterday it was Bartosz that came out on top. Will he be able to repeat that performance?
Oh, it'll be interesting to find out. We've had quite a few, few occurrences, I think, in Portland regionals, of course, when, during Swiss rounds, one player would have beaten the other consistently, but then in the top 8, it was the other way around.
Yeah,
so very, very different. But Luca representing Italy and Bartosz representing Poland. So a lot of Italy representation in day 2 today. So I think Luca's actually running a team that's a lot of the other Italian players are running. But here we can see the accomplishments on screen, both veterans of the game. All these top 16 finishes for Luca, top 6 worlds day 2, and then Bartosz on the other side. Also top 8 in a special event, which is essentially a regionals, just a different pricing structure, and Frankfurt regionals top 8, just so many accolades, and these two players are really, really experienced, and this will be an excellent match.
Yeah, all of those top 8s for Bartosz. He'll be looking in this tournament to turn that top 8 into something even better, even though top 8 itself is certainly nothing to be ignored. And there's Luca's little mascot there, his Turtwig, cute little thing on the desk. Hello, Luca. Give us a thumbs up there. Let's look at his team. Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Chi-Yu, Gyarados, Ting-Lu, and Iron Hands. I've been really interested, Zoe, to see how many Ting-Lu and Chi-Yus we've seen on the same team, because of course their abilities counteract each other.
Yeah, there's been so many of these. I think that it's the way a lot of players, what I've seen is they'll say, for instance, lead Chi-Yu Fluttermane, get some damage off, and then when they see that the opponent is in range of, very heavily chipped and is in range of a Dazzling Gleam from that Fluttermane, they'll then switch out the Chi-Yu, and in the Ting-Lu. But here we've got Bartosz's team with a Fluttermane, King Gambit, Chi-Yu, Iron Bundle, Great Tusk, and Talonflame. So Chi-Yu and Fluttermane shared between the two players, but the other Pokemon are very different. And Talonflame, not seen as much, but with the priority Tailwind when it's at full health, certainly really, really, really strong option for Bartosz. Yeah,
absolutely, and worth calling out for Luca as well. He was running that Amoonguss too. But yes, for Bartosz, it is Chi-Yu without the Ting-Lu this time, and of course paired with that Iron Bundle will be able to deal massive special damage thanks to the Chi-Yu lowering the special defense of all Pokemon on the field. And there we go, there's our Twitch poll trainers. Let us know who you think is going to win. Currently, it's in Luca's favor, but Bartosz was the winner for yesterday's match, so bear that in mind when you're casting your vote.
Just wanted to have a look at these two teams in depth. So Bartosz has a Terra Poison Gyarados, which is really, really interesting. I think Gyarados mostly tends to be something like Steel, which has a little bit more resistance as compared to Poison. But Poison as a Terra has been quite an interesting pick. Ever since Regulation A, we've had Poison Terra Garganacl and then Poison Terra Baxcalibur. So because of Fluttermane being so predominant in the format, that Poison's actually turning out to be a really, really good Terra option.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating, I think, because Poison is not a type that's seen much love in previous generations, I feel like. But as a defensive type, people are realizing with Terastallizing being an option how potent it can be. Yes, it seems like Twitch has fairly settled on Luca being the winner here, but I don't know. We'll have to see how the match shakes up, and we'll have to see if you're correct in the end.
Yeah, so looking at these two teams in general, so the Fluttermane and the Chi-Yu, of course, the different sets, I believe. Let me just have a quick look. So yes, so Luca is running a safety goggles Chi-Yu, which is very good against Amoonguss, which of course Bartosz does not have. So in this instance, it may not be as useful, but Bartosz has the Focus Sash Chi-Yu, so that suggests it might be a little bit more offensive, and it might just be, it's not so much of a support Pokemon as Luca's Chi-Yu could be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so fascinating to see how differently these trainers run their Pokemon. It can be the difference between a win and a loss. But here we go. We're getting into this game one, and it's Talonflame and Fluttermane being led for Bartosz, and for Luca it's going to be Fluttermane and Iron Hand. So these Fluttermanes staring each other down. We see the Photosynthesis ability activate thanks to its booster energy, special attack being the stat of choice. But there was no booster energy there for Bartosz's Fluttermane, because instead it is running the choice spec, so really heavy damage from the get-go, and crucially Bartosz will be able to switch out that Fluttermane and bring it back in with no reduction to the damage. But once the booster energy is used up, as it has been for Luca, as long as it switches out, it will no longer have that boost.
Yeah, so the Talonflame Fluttermane lead from Bartosz's side indicates that perhaps Bartosz is thinking about just an immediate turn 1 Tailwind plus Dazzling Gleam or some really strong move coming from the Talonflame. But of course, the Talonflame is vulnerable to a fake out from the Iron Hands, and we won't know which Fluttermane is going to be faster, but the Iron Hands is actually going to be withdrawn for this turn, and instead the Among Us is going to take its place. So if the Talonflame went for a Tailwind, it's going to be very free to set it up without taking any damage this turn.
Safe to do that. Of course, Talonflame has the Ghost Terror type on it, so any fake out would have been null and void there, but it doesn't do that. It went for a taunt into the Fluttermane slot as a Moonblast goes into the Among Us. So a really good switch there for Luca, because that was, of course, once the Iron Hands would have taken super effective damage, but Among Us is able to take that far better. Now, on this next turn, the Talonflame could well be fairly free to set up a Tailwind. There's no fake out on the field. It gets priority thanks to its Gale Wings ability. So, yes, we could well be seeing a very fast-paced game from Bartosz here.
We saw the taunt from the Talonflame in that previous turn. I almost wonder if Bartosz was kind of predicting some sort of switch-in, because you typically do not taunt a Fluttermane, but this Fluttermane also does have Substitute, so maybe that was something that Bartosz was very scared of, because we've seen multiple times on stream, Substitute Fluttermanes are really, really scary, and Bartosz is going to recall that Fluttermane in favor of the King Gambit, so a really good switch-in, just making sure that it's not going to be taking any super effective hits from that Fluttermane.
Yeah, absolutely, and another very offensive pick for Bartosz going into this game with that King Gambit. This Among Us is now taunted for Luca, so any of those support moves, it's not going to be able to go for until it shakes off that taunt. Shadow Ball going to the King Gambit, it doesn't get a special defense drop, so a little bit of chip damage, but the more Shadow Balls that go out into that slot, the more likely it is that it will get that special defense drop, and those will start to rack up really quite fast.
Luca's side of the board is looking quite, not in the best position. The Fluttermane is heavily threatened by the King Gambit and not really able to do much, and he can't really land any super effective hits on that Talonflame either. And with the Among Us taunted, its only choice is to go for Pollen Puffs, which could be useful, but in this situation, when your Fluttermane is in danger of getting KO'd by the King Gambit, you might not want to be going for a Pollen Puff. Yeah,
Luca's Among Us is running Clear Smog as well. It would be able to go for that, but there are currently, aside from his own Fluttermane, there are no boosts on the field, so he won't want to be going for a Clear Smog at this point. Will-O-Wisp is going to connect into Luca's Among Us, so perhaps again predicting a switch there, but it will be burned, taking a little bit of chip damage. That is one way to deal with this Pokemon. It's a big Shadow Ball coming out from Luca into Bartosz's Talonflame, so that Gale Wings ability is broken, and Clear Smog is enough for the knockout. So yes, he did get rid of that booster energy boost onto his own Fluttermane, but in favor of getting rid of Bartosz's Talonflame.
I never thought there'd be a day where I saw an Among Us knock out a Talonflame with a Clear Smog, but here we go, this Among Us did it. The Talonflame was at very low health and not quite known for having really strong defenses, but now because Bartosz never actually set up the Tailwind, the rest of his team is going to just have to rely on their natural speed training to be able to outspeed Luca's team, or maybe some bulk if they're trained to survive any super effective hits.
Yeah, so it was Bartosz when these players faced each other yesterday who came out on top, but Luca is off to an early lead here. Will he be able to maintain it as Bartosz locks in which Pokemon is going to be joining the field at this point? As these Fluttermanes bob up and down, staring each other down, it's King Gambit that comes back in with that little bit of chip damage from the Shadow Ball before.
That King Gambit right now is quite free to actually target the Fluttermane because the Among Us is taunted, so it cannot go for a Rage Powder. Of course, that does mean that Luca can switch, and we've seen several times now Luca switching in a Pokemon that we didn't quite expect him to switch in, but also leading that Among Us in that last turn, which was it wasn't really doing anything, but then he soaked up that Will-O-Wisp, which if had Luca switched in his Iron Hands, it would have been burned.
Yeah, exactly. Iron Hands would not want to receive that burn, so perhaps it was a little bit of a prediction there from Bartosz going for the Will-O-Wisp. Taking a little while to lock in his move, it's fair enough, he's off to an early disadvantage, and clearly the amount of time he's taking, it suggests that Talonflame was fairly crucial to his strategy, but it's going to be a Terror instead coming out. One of these Pokemon will be changing its type, and it's going to be Bartosz's King Gambit, which is now the Flying type, so it now has ground immunity, where ground was once super effective effective before this Terror. So Flying type Kingambit is on the field. A Shadow Ball is going to connect into Bartosz's Flutter Mane. Is it going to be enough for the knockout? Yes, it is.
Yes.
That is a super effective hit. It's no crit. It's just a fast and frail Flutter Mane, it seems, from Bartosz, who, of course, was running those choice specs on the Flutter Mane. It's going to be a Flying type Terror Blast from Kingambit. Will it be enough to pick up the Amoonguss? Yes, it will, because it received enough chip damage already. So one knockout apiece for these trainers on this turn. The tempo of this game is really starting to rack up.
Now that Bartosz has used up his Terror option, the Kingambit is no longer resistant to Flutter Mane's Ghost type attacks, and it is also now going to be taking super effective hits from any of Iron Hand's electric type attacks. Of course, it did get rid of its fighting weakness, but it's still going to be taking really, really hard hits from that wild charge. But I think Bartosz showing a little bit of foresight here, bringing in the Great Tusk, so indicating that he is going to plan on going for an Earthquake and just having the Kingambit being flying, going to be immune to all those super effective ground type attacks.
Yeah, it's a really nice technique there, and something that Terastallization bringing in Gen 9 it really gives us the opportunity to do. In no other generation, unless that Kingambit were carrying an air balloon, for example, would it be able to be immune to an Earthquake. But Fake Out is going to come out from Luca's Iron Hands. Great Tusk flinching, not being able to move this turn, and a Moonblast is enough for the knockout immediately onto that Great Tusk. So the resources for Bartosz are really being whittled away quite quickly, and it's Iron Head coming into Flutter Mane, another super effective hit and another knockout in this game. So, oh my goodness, Zoe, the tempo is really ramping up here as Ting Lu joins the field with Iron Hands, and it's this Kingambit against the world, but as long as it's that Terra Flying type, it's not going to appreciate any electric type moves from Luca's Iron Hands.
No, it will not. And with the Iron Hands at it's at full health, it's not going to be knocked out by any Terror Blast, which it's going to be taking neutral damage from because of its part electric typing. So it looks like this match will be going to Luca because there's really not much that the Kingambit can do. And I see both players taking their time, maybe Bartosz a little bit, just thinking about Game 2 and how he's going to adapt to that. Because in that previous turn, the Great Tusk, because it was Choice Scarfed, it was unable to actually protect. And we see now a Terror Blast coming off. Maybe Bartosz just curious to see how much damage that will do and gathering some information for Game 2.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a crucial thing to do here. This Kingambit is clearly very bulky, but with this Wild Charge coming out, it is, of course, not enough for the Kingambit to survive. So it goes down, and taking Game 1, it will be Luca. He gets an early lead against his opponent who beats him in Day 1 yesterday.
Yeah, so a really great match here. I wonder if a lot of the players, I think by now, both players would have known which Flutter Mane was the faster Flutter Mane, because of course they did face each other yesterday. I don't know if they knew any of the other damage calcs, for instance, that Kingambit, a Terra Flying, how much damage that would do to the Iron Hands in its regular form without the Terra Flying. I'm just going to quickly check what the Iron Hands Terra is. It's actually Terra Grass. So had the Iron Hands gone for Terra for any reason, which I don't think he would have done in this turn, he would have been taking super effective. But that Kingambit, I think the Terra Blast it did get rid of the Amoonguss, but I think he left the Flutter Mane on the field for maybe just a little bit too long, because that Flutter Mane was able to deal so much damage, just putting the Talonflame in range of a clear Smog and then losing a Talonflame and losing his Tailwind option.
Yeah, it stings to lose your Talonflame to a clear Smog. And yeah, I think that the time that Bartosz was taking to lock in his moves for the remainder of that game, it just goes to show how important Talonflame was for his strategy. So he definitely wants to protect that. And he did have the option to do that on that turn 1. Luca's Iron Hands didn't, in fact, go for the Fake Out, but this Talonflame for Bartosz has the Ghost Terror type, so it wouldn't have mattered too much there anyway. It seemed like Bartosz, yes, he was spreading around Will-O-Wisp and Tauns, but if he needed that Tailwind, he really needed to set it up sooner.
Yes, that Talonflame I think was quite crucial to Bartosz, just because the Tailwind we saw that the Flutter Mane on Bartosz's side is slower. So had the Talonflame been able to get up a Tailwind, which the Talonflame we saw when he went for the Will-O-Wisp onto the Amoonguss, it outsped that Flutter Mane. So even though Flutter Mane is naturally faster than Talonflame, that Luca's Flutter Mane looks to be a little bit more defensive, specially trained to be more specially offensive, and so does Bartosz's, but it looks like Luca's Flutter Mane is going to be faster.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and Luca's Flutter Mane also has that substitute, which is presumably what Bartosz was trying to shut down with his Talonflame's taunt into it, because it can be a real pest to remove from the field. But wow, Zoe, so many quick knockouts in that game as we got into the later game, especially on both sides, to be honest. It seemed like really it could have gone either way, perhaps, had that Talonflame survived a little bit longer. And there it is again, Talonflame and Fluttermane on the field for Bartosz, and for Luca, it's going to be that Fluttermane and Iron Hands. So a similar start to the game. We'll have to see if the rest of the game shakes up in a similar way.
Exact same leads from both players, so both players just deciding that this is their best options going into each other's teams. Of course, there's a lot of Terra options with the Talon. Is the Talonflame going to go for a Terra Ghost and just guarantee that Tailwind setup, and so that Bartosz's Fluttermane can go before the Iron Hands? Or is the Iron Hands going to predict that and then not go for the fake out and instead go for an attack, with the Fluttermane go for a Shadow Ball then into the Talonflame, predicting that? So a lot of predictions all around, and I think both players are taking their time to try and figure out their next move.
Yeah, exactly. We can see Luca here hovering that Shadow Ball, which one to go for, because it would be super effective onto the Talonflame if it terastallizes. And Iron Hands there to provide some support as well, but it's an immediate terror in this particular game, and it will be going into the Fluttermane, I believe, on Bartosz's side. So it's now the Fairy type, so it won't be taking any super effective damage from any Shadow Balls coming out. And Fake Out is able to connect into the Talonflame. So not only is it not able to move this turn with potentially a Tailwind, but its focus, its Gale Wings ability, is broken. So its flying type moves will no longer be priority. Fairy, Terra, Fluttermane dealing a Shadow Ball into Iron Hands rather than a potentially super effective hit, but it does get that special defense drop into Luca's Iron Hands. So a really interesting first turn, and some things you might not have expected. But of course, that Fairy Terastallization on Bartosz's Fluttermane means it doesn't take super effective from the Shadow Ball that Luca's Fluttermane can deal out.
So now Bartosz has locked himself into the Shadow Ball onto the Fluttermane. That's really good information for Luca, because he knows that he hasn't gone for a Terra yet. So if he does not go for the Terra, this turn there is going to be a Tailwind coming off from the Talonflame if it chooses to go for that, because that Talonflame is currently the fastest Pokemon on the field. And because Luca's Talonflame, not Talonflame, Fluttermane is currently hasn't got a Terra. It can be knocked out by a Shadow Ball. Now, I don't know how much damage it will take, but it's going to be going for Protect anyway, just to keep itself safe for this turn and just stall out a turn of, not stall out, to just scout out what's going to happen. But Tailwind does go up, and a Shadow Ball coming off from Bartosz's Fluttermane.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting Protect there, because it does leave the Talonflame free to set up that Tailwind. Volt Switch isn't going to be enough for the knockout either. Iron Hand's not known for its special attack. But yes, so Fluttermane, Talonflame, there's poetry going on the field right now in this Swiss round 11, as Luca is going to decide who to bring in place of the Iron Hands, having gone for that Volt Switch. We can see the Amoonguss and the Ting Lu in the back there, both very bulky Pokemon, both Pokemon that can take a few hits. But of course, any Fairy type moves, especially with that Fairy Terror on Bartosz's Fluttermane, will be dealing even more damage, and super effective at that, than normal. So he's really taking his time, and it will be the Amoonguss joining the field, so it would be resisting any Fairy type moves from Bartosz's Fluttermane.
Amoonguss is quite an interesting switch in here, because the Fluttermane on Bartosz's side is locked into Shadow Ball, so it's quite safe to switch in the Ting Lu. But maybe Luca was a bit scared of a potential Will-O-Wisp coming from that Talonflame, because we've seen that in previous game. In that previous game, the Talonflame trying to go for Will-O-Wisp, but the Amoonguss was able to sponge that hit. And Amoonguss having both Pollen Puff and Clear Smog is actually quite useful, because even if it does get taunted, it can still help out its teammates by restoring their health.
Yeah, exactly. Pollen Puff is such a useful move in that regard. It doesn't really count as a status move, because it can deal damage if you choose to dish it onto your opponent, but still heal up your own Pokemon even if it is taunted. So that's why it is so prevalent in this format, and why Amoonguss is so prevalent as a Pokemon as well. Rage Powder is going to be redirecting any of Bartosz's single target attacks into the Amoonguss, and it's going to be a Brave Bird, which goes to show that that Talonflame is wearing those safety goggles, so it's immune to the Rage Powder powder there. It will be Shadow Ball coming out into the Amoonguss. It brings it down to about a third of its health, but activates that berry that it is holding, so recovering a good chunk of its health back, and of course it could switch out for a regenerator recovery at any point too, but Shadow Ball is going to be enough to pick up the knockout on Bartosz's Talonflame. One could argue though that Talonflame had put in the work that it needed to, setting up that Tailwind.
That Talonflame actually stayed on the field for quite a long time. Most Talonflames tend to just set up Tailwind and then get knocked out very shortly after and allow a teammate to come in. So I think Bartosz at this moment might be okay with the Talonflame being knocked out, because then he gets to send in another Pokemon. But of course, the Talonflame did carry the safety goggles and also carried Taunt. And now with the Talonflame knocked out, this Amoonguss cannot be taunted anymore. So the Amoonguss is quite free to start going for Spores.
Yeah, it is, and that's always a very threatening option that Amoonguss can go for. And, you know, if he times it right, then he might be able to just be going for Spore every turn, and whatever switches in will take that Spore as well, now that Talonflame is gone. But, yes, it is Bartosz who loses his first Pokemon early in this game with Talonflame going down. Great Tusk now in the field. It will be very vulnerable to a potential Moonblast that could come out from Luca's Flutter Mane, unless it chooses to protect or switch in defensively. But, yes, these players, playing quite a positional game with their Pokemon at this point. Flutter Mane is going to switch out, and in comes instead the Iron Bundle. Joining the field here, a very fast Pokemon indeed, but Bartosz's Great Tusk is carrying that Choice Scarf. It will be the Iron Bundle speed that's heightened by the booster energy. Amoonguss attempting another Rage Powder here, but if it's an Earthquake coming out, for example, from the Great Tusk, that won't make too much difference. Or indeed a Rock Slide, which Amoonguss fortunately dodges, and it's not enough for the knockout on the Flutter Mane, and a Moonblast is enough for the one-hit knockout onto Great Tusk. So that could have been huge had the Rock Slide been able to pick up the Flutter Mane there, or indeed got a flinch, which it can do as well. I
almost wonder if that was a damage roll, because had the Rock Slide picked up the knockout onto that Flutter Mane, the Great Tusk would have been able to stop. Of course, the Amoonguss dodged that Rock Slide, so it looks like, you know, did it go for... Oh no, he went for the Rage Powder earlier, sorry. I totally forgot. But yeah, he could have gone for a Spore at the end of that turn. But, you know, Iron Bundle coming in is also going to heavily threaten that Amoonguss. But now that Bartosz has lost 2 Pokemon, he's down to his final 2. And once this Flutter Mane picks a move to lock into, it cannot switch anymore. So a play that Luca could make is just to go for it. I don't think the Amoonguss can protect, but he could certainly protect his Flutter Mane just to scout out what move that Bartosz's Flutter Mane is going to lock into.
Yeah, exactly, and that is what's happening here. Luca's Flutter Mane is going for the Protect here. Icy Wind will be, of course, protected by Luca's Flutter Mane, but it's going to connect onto the Amoonguss. It's going to be a super effective hit. It's not enough for the knockout. It's not the most powerful move. Amoonguss' speed drop, but it doesn't mind too much about that. A big Terra Fairy boosted Moonblast going out into the Amoonguss. It's a resisted hit, but it is enough for the knockout. So Luca loses that. Amoonguss will be bringing in a Pokemon he has in the back. It's currently Luca who has the Pokemon advantage, even though his Flutter Mane is on exceedingly low health. The Tailwind expires for Bartosz's side, so it won't have that speed boost anymore. And even though there's a Pokemon advantage here for Luca, it's looking, you know, like there could be still some positioning going on from his side, and potentially looking for a way to get back into this game.
Of course, because Bartosz's Flutter Mane is unable to protect, it's forced to just attack this turn. The Iron Bundle can protect, but because Bartosz's Flutter Mane is slower, if the Iron Bundle is not able to get an Icy Wind off, the Flutter Mane is going to get knocked out, and that's exactly what we see. The Iron Bundle is going to have to take a Fake Out, and allowing Luca's Flutter Mane to get the knockout with the Moonblast onto Bartosz's Flutter Mane, and it is now Iron Bundle versus the remainder of Luca's team.
Yeah, it is. It's, wow, Bartosz is looking on the back foot here. All of a sudden, of course, Iron Bundle, a very powerful and a very fast Pokemon. But no, he sees that there's nothing that can be done here. Bartosz is going to forfeit, and it will be Luca who takes this round 11 of Swiss. So a switch up from yesterday, which Bartosz won. This time, Luca comes out on top.
What a game that was. I think Luca adjusted really, really well. I think maybe in the previous day when he faced Bartosz, he probably did, even though he lost, he scouted a lot of really useful information. And with the rest that he got from last night, he was able to formulate a good battle plan against Bartosz and just figure out that, yes, my Flutter Mane is faster. If I can deny all the forms of speed control, then I can, knock out his Pokemon before he knocks out mine.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the Tailwind would have been crucial in that game one had it been set up. But of course, the Talonflame did go down before it was able to do that. It was able to spread around some Will-O-Wisps and some Taunts. It's a really useful Pokemon at the moment. But, even with that Tailwind, Bartosz was not able to clinch out the victory there, just losing too many resources. And a crucial turn to call out in that game two was the Rock Slide not getting the knockout on that Flutter Mane, or indeed a flinch, because it was that Flutter Mane that was able to deal a one-hit knockout back to the Great Tusk on Bartosz's side, which could have put in some work for him.
I think Luca also managed the speed control on Bartosz's side really, really well. He was, dancing around with the protects and also switching in the Iron Hands at the right moments and then just going for a fake out, which of course forces your opponent to flinch and then burn a turn of whatever Tailwind, or maybe it was Icy Wind. I think at the end of that game too, when the Icy Wind was coming out, had the Iron Hands not been on the field, it would have been an entirely different story, because then the Icy Wind from the Iron Bundle would have come out and picked up the knockout on that 2 HP Flutter Mane.
Yeah, exactly. It's really well stalled out by Luca there. And, I mean, looking at their teams, we didn't see the Chi-Yu join the field for Luca. It was that he had the Ting Lu there as well, which wasn't able to put in too much work over the course of that game. But, yeah, certainly Luca will be feeling pretty thrilled about that he was able to clinch out the victory against Bartosz, having lost yesterday. And it goes to show that the more information you can glean about your opponent's team, the better position it puts you into.
And it also goes to show that even though this is an open team sheet format, the stats of your Pokemon are hidden from your opponent. Yeah. So only you know as a trainer how much damage your Pokemon do, how fast you are. And sometimes when you're facing, say, you've got your own Flutter Mane and you're facing a Flutter Mane on the field, you might not necessarily know, and that's really, really crucial information. I think only people who say put maximum investment into speed will go, oh yes, it's safe for me to start attacking. But the other players may have to spend a few turns or maybe just a few battles to understand, oh, this is how much damage that Pokemon does to mine. Maybe that indicates that it's trained to be a little bit more specially defensive, or it's trained to be a bit more offensive, and therefore I can actually pick up more knockouts, or I can deal more damage with my moves.
Yeah, exactly, and it's also a really good showcase of, speaking of hyper or high offense, using that Choice Specs item. If you have Protect available on your Pokemon on the field and your opponent is down to his final two, one of which has Choice Specs, do a double Protect, and that opponent is then locked into that move. And that gives you crucial information going into the rest of the game. They can't reset it as long as it's one of the final two Pokemon on the field. And a really useful lesson there, especially given that Flutter Mane, it's quite common that Flutter Manes carry those Choice Specs.
I find it really, I personally think it's really cool that in this open team sheet format, Choice Lock Pokemon, you as a trainer, you have to really think about, are you really going to put any sort of choice items? Because your opponent is going to know immediately that you cannot protect and you're forced to lock into a move. Whereas in previous formats, you can kind of bluff some moves a little bit without your opponent knowing, and you can also bluff a choice item by just repeatedly going for the same move each turn. So it's really, really interesting. But, choice items still being really, really popular just goes to show that with good experience and good playing, just playing really, really well, it doesn't matter if the opponent knows what your items you've got. You still got to beat that team.
Yeah, exactly. It's and you don't know what your opponent's going to be thinking. There's only so far the open team sheet can help you. But you know what? This format might be one of the ones where I've seen the most choice items I've ever seen. It seems like most of the teams that we featured on stream have had at least one choice item there. And yesterday, Choice Scarf Great Tusk was really rising to the fore because of those rock slides it can deal out, which is, decent chip damage and spread damage at that, but also might get that flinch. And that's kind of the best of both worlds. You're dealing out damage without taking any in return.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Pokemon, like Great Tusk and Flutter Mane in particular, they tend to hold a choice spec. I think Great Tusk is just in that speed tier range where it would really benefit from that choice scarf. And of course, having access to Rock Slide is very, very scary for your opponent, because when you're faster than your opponent, you will always have that chance to flinch. And Flutter Manes, of course, I think we've seen an equal distribution of boosted energy and choice specs, but choice specs, of course, allows you to get that immediate damage straight away, and also you can switch out and switch back in and you'll still get that damage boost. But actually in that last game, Luca did switch out his Flutter Mane, and then switched to the back end, and he was still doing really heavy damage. So Flutter Mane just proving the reason why it's such a strong Pokemon in this format. It doesn't even need an item to be taking the knockouts.
Yeah, testament to Flutter Mane's special attack. And yeah, in an ideal world, I suppose, you know, if you're putting a Choice Scarf on your Pokemon, it's faster than it was before, so you could think, oh, well, in that case, I have more effort values that I can channel into its defensive stats, say, or its attack. But, you know, if there's another trainer who's running maximum speed and a Choice Scarf on their Great Tusk, then you're still going to be underspeeding that particular Great Tusk. So, you know, unfortunately, you still have to, if you're running a choice item, say Specs or Band or Scarf, you still have to, in most cases, invest all of those effort values into the stat that it boosts up anyway.
I think that's really particularly noticeable in a Pokemon like Iron Bundle, which runs Boost Energy to boost its speed, and trainers typically train it to be like the fastest it can be, and Iron Bundle is already the fastest Pokemon in the... Or maybe Dragapult is faster, but very few people use Dragapult, except if you're Justin Tang. But Iron Bundle is fast, just it has to be trained to be fast because particularly during Regulation B, there was so much Iron Bundle running around that you cannot risk losing that speed type to an opposing Iron Bundle. So in some ways, trainers actually had no choice but to just make their Iron Bundles as fast as they can because they don't want to lose that speed. Well, it's kind of like matching Tailwinds. Like if your opponent's got Tailwind and you've got Tailwind, it's like a nod to each other. Okay, we're going to Tailwind.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to have to match this.
Yeah, exactly. And another great reason to have such a speedy Iron Bundle is because it can dish out those icy winds, so then reducing further the speed on your side as well. You might have a Tailwind or something as well that you can set up from your side. But yeah, a very fast and very offensive Pokemon. But what a pleasure it's been to cast with you, Zoe. That round 2 of Swiss. We do have our interview ready with our winner of round 2 there, Luca Ceribelli.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. We are here live with Luca Ceribelli, that winner of that round 2 of our Day 2 Swiss here in Malmö. How are you doing, Luca?
Well, I'm doing great because obviously getting here from Italy, being able to make Day 2, and also like I won my last 2 games, so it's definitely going great. I hope I won't let go of the team, and I'll keep running.
Brilliant, yeah, and in that matchup as well, I really loved how you got that double up KO with the Amoonguss and the Clear Smog in that game 1. Was that a KO that you knew you were going to be able to get with the Flutter Mane and the Amoonguss together?
Okay, so to be honest, I played with Bartosz yesterday, and to be honest, I saw the damage of Shadow Ball. I didn't see the damage of Clear Smog. I wasn't sure I would have been able to kill, but either way I thought that it was better because I would have either put Talonflame in KO range from any Brave Bird recoil or like fake out from Iron Hands. Also because I saw that in the first games, a lot of the times like he didn't Terra neither Talonflame or Flutter Mane because he wanted to keep the Terra for King Gambit in the back. So I played a lot even yesterday onto the fact that he didn't want to Terra, and I wanted to force him to Terra his first Pokemons. Like you saw that I always clicked Shadow Ball onto Flutter Mane and such because I wanted him to Terra, because you see, even when he Terra'd, then he did not have it for the other mons like such as King Gambit, but even like Great Tusk also wasn't without the Terra, was just a free fake out and Moonblast something to your range.
Yeah, absolutely, just so easy. So expertly played, obviously, in that just very convincing game, like 2-game set, which is incredible. So I'll just ask one last question before we go into round 3. What are your future plans for the rest of the season? You're going to go to Turin or Worlds?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to Turin because obviously I'm from Italy. It's like 3 hours away from my home, and also like I'm technically the defending champion of Turin. I won it back in 2017 when I was like 14. Ooh. So I obviously want to go there and defend my title. But after Turin, I don't really know what the future holds. I guess I'll just see how many CPs I've got at the end of the season, because I don't think I'm able to go to to Japan without a day-2 invitation. Maybe if I am able to do well here and do well in Turin, maybe some opportunities will open up and I will go. But right now, probably Turin is going to be my last event of the season, but I'm sure gonna try to make it the most memorable one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Luca, for coming on. And we will be quickly getting ready into round 3 of the day 2 here, Swiss at Malmö. It's been Luca Ceribelli and David Partington. We'll be back with a short break before round 3.